Well, we've talked a lot about what is in the law, but there's a big question about what's not in it as well. And that is the inclusion of biological sex as a protected characteristic. That could have been in it, but it's not. And some campaigners are not happy about that. And they include Susan Smith, who is director of the group For Women Scotland. Hi, Susan.
Hello.
At the heart of this debate has been J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, who lives in Edinburgh and who supports your group, doesn't she? Which both she and you have been highly critical of the Scottish Government's failed attempts, to make it easier to legally change gender. Now, J.K. Rowling, when this law came out, posted a series of, I was going to say tweets, but I think we have to call them X's now. Anyway, posts on the social media platform X, describing several transgender women as men. These included various people, convicted prisoners, some trans activists, some other public figures. And she was basically challenging the police to arrest her, wasn't she, if they thought she had committed an offence. What did you think of that?
I thought it was really brave, and I think it's meant a great deal to a lot of women who are really quite nervous about what this is going to mean for them as women's rights campaigners. And essentially, she's taken the heat off them, and she has painted a target on herself, knowing that she has the capacity to absorb that to a greater extent than many other women.
Hasn't she painted a target on the people about whom she is tweeting, not all of whom, by any means, are convicted criminals? Some are public figures who just happen to be transgender.
I don't think so, because everything she said about those people is known. And also, those people have made a big fuss about moving into and trying to take women's spaces. This has been the reason, frankly. She hasn't just put an ordinary trans person who is quietly getting on with their life. She's put up people who have deliberately sought out positions or jobs that are reserved for women and that are supposed to be reserved for women on the basis of sex. And they have done that quite deliberately in some cases.
Now, one of the people whom J.K. Rowling mentioned in her thread was Katie Neves. And Katie Neves spoke to our colleagues on The World at One on Radio 4.
Well, what she's doing is she's inciting hate from other people as well. And that's exactly what she's done. She knows somebody who's got 14 million followers. With power comes great responsibility, and she's not using that wisely. I mean, she's doing that, and she knows that her followers are going to be sending out hate messages. And she knows exactly what she's doing, especially as she put out this series of tweets, and she put some sex offenders at the top of the list there, and then she put some prominent trans people who are definitely not sex offenders, including me, on that list. And by putting those sex offenders in, it implied that all trans people are sex offenders, which is ridiculous. Trans people are just ordinary members of society. We're just ordinary people who want to be happy. That's it. That's all it is.
David, you're still with us. J.K. Rowling has challenged the police effectively to arrest her if they think she's committed a crime. And there's some breaking news on that, isn't there?
There is, yeah. So Police Scotland have now come back on this, and they say that she's not going to be charged over this. Police Scotland spokesperson said, "We have received complaints in relation to the social media posts. These comments are not assessed to be criminal and no further action will be taken." So I suppose this potentially is answering one of the big questions a lot of people had about this legislation. For example, could you say that you didn't consider a trans person to have changed from male to female? Would saying that be a breach of this law? Would that be something this law would clamp down on? And at least on the one very public example we have now, Police Scotland have looked at it and said, no, you can still do that.
Susan, what's your reaction to that?
Well, that's great. But you know what? That's happened because she forced their hand. They have had to come out and say that. Now, hopefully, anybody else who says something similar will know that they are protected, because it would be highly hypocritical of the police to pass up the opportunity to prosecute J.K. Rowling, but go after an ordinary woman who made a similar comment. So I think that's a great relief, but it's only happened because she pushed it. And what the Scottish government missed ages ago was writing this sort of detail into the guidance. Hamza Yusuf made a promise to myself and Lucy Hunter-Blackburn in the committee stages.
Who's another campaigner?
Indeed, yes. She's with Mary Blackburn Mackenzie. And he said that they would consult and they would talk about the sort of detail, the sort of examples, like saying sex is real, sex is immutable. And they would put that in the guidance for the police, and they didn't do it. And what we've seen with the police guidance is it's a bit of a mess, and the police have said it's not fit for purpose. So we were obviously really worried as to how they would and could react and could interpret it. So I'm really pleased that she's pushed them to the point where they've had to say, no, these are not crimes.
And you mentioned the lack of biological sex as a protected characteristic in this law. But David, in fairness to the Scottish Government, they're not sitting completely idle on that topic, are they, by any means? What's their plan for a misogyny law that would include some degree of protection for women?
That's right. So eventually, when the Scottish Government did come out with this this bill that didn't have sex as one of the protected characteristics, they said they were going to legislate separately when it came to misogyny. And we heard from the Minister, Siobhan Brown, who's responsible for this Hate Crime Act yesterday, saying that the justification for that was that they wanted to go further on misogyny. But I suppose the awkward position for the Scottish Government at the moment is that law, that there's no bill, it's still going to be, you'd imagine, quite a long time before any law looking at misogyny comes onto the statute book. And therefore, there is this gap at the moment that the protected characteristics we've been speaking about, age, disability, religion, etc. But actually, at the moment, for biological sex, when it comes to hate crime, until the Scottish Government bring forward that legislation, that's currently not there.
And just finally, Susan, on that, the Scottish Government have taken this course of action. They say there'll be 5 individual offences that they are planning to introduce on the basis of a recommendation by a report into misogyny carried out by Baroness Helena Kennedy, the prominent barrister, who said that she thought there needed to be a separate approach to misogyny because it's so deeply rooted in our patriarchal ecosystem. Are you saying that Baroness Kennedy, Casey, is wrong?
Not necessarily, but I think that you could do both. You know, you could have had sex in there as an aggregator, and then that would be there now, ready to go. And then if it was found that that was impractical or it wasn't working or that there were better methods of dealing with that, that could have then been teased out through the misogyny working group and through scrutiny of any proposed legislation. But at the moment, I am not sure where that proposed legislation is. It's somewhere in the never, never, I think.
All right, Susan Smith, thank you very much for joining us on Newscast. And David Wallace-Lockhart, thank you as well. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.